Welcome back, everyone, to our ongoing exploration of the digital diaspora. This is our sixth deep dive, and today we're focusing on something really specific and honestly pretty fascinating: health tourism.
That's right. And this one, it's really for you, the curious learner out there. We want to shed some light on, the whole complex picture of seeking medical care across borders.
But without getting totally bogged down in jargon or overwhelming detail.
Exactly. We'll look at what motivates people, what the actual journey looks like, and importantly, some of the really critical things you need to think about.
Yeah, and we're pulling from recent stuff, reports from 2024 and this year, but we'll also touch on the history a bit just to give that full picture of how health tourism got to where it is now.
Our goal really is to pull out the key insights, sort of connect the dots for you, and hopefully trigger a few aha moments along the way.
Okay, let's get into it then. When we say health tourism,
Yeah.
what exactly are we talking about? Is it just like getting your teeth cleaned while on holiday?
Huh? Well, sometimes maybe, but generally no. It's more intentional than that. It really involves actively traveling across international borders, specifically to get medical, dental, or even surgical care.
Okay, actively seeking it out.
Yes. And often the idea is that you're looking for care that's maybe equivalent to or sometimes even perceived as better than what you could get back home.
Right. So what are the big reasons? What really pushes individuals to, pack their bags and go abroad for healthcare?
Well, there are a few main drivers. First off, access is a huge one.
Access, meaning?
Meaning access to specific treatments, maybe some kind of specialized surgery or certain medical infrastructure that just isn't available in their own country. Think very niche procedures or cutting-edge therapies.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. If you just can't get it locally, you look further afield.
Exactly. Then there's the pull of advanced medical tech and methods. Some countries or specific clinics are, really leaders in certain fields. They have the latest equipment, the newest techniques.
And people want the best, naturally.
They do. And another big factor, and you hear this a lot, is shorter waiting times.
Ah, yes. The dreaded waiting lists.
Right. In some national health systems, the wait for certain procedures can be incredibly long. So the chance to get treated much sooner elsewhere is, well, it's a really powerful motivator for a lot of people.
Okay, so access, tech, speed.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Now, this whole thing feels very modern, very connected world. But is traveling for health actually a new idea?
Oh, not at all. Not really. I mean, the idea of traveling for health benefits goes way back. Think about ancient Greeks and Romans going to thermal baths.
Right.
Exactly. And that continued for centuries. Wealthy Europeans traveling to famous spa towns for cures and recuperation. It was maybe more about wellness back then.
So wellness focused initially. How did it shift towards actual medical procedures?
Well, later on, say in the back half of the 20th century, we started seeing a different flow. Patients from developing countries began traveling to developed nations.
Why that direction?
They were seeking more advanced medical expertise, technologies, things that just weren't available in their home healthcare systems at the time.
Interesting. So for quite a while, the main current was from, let's say, less developed or more developed countries seeking advanced care.
That was the dominant pattern, yes. But then, more recently, the landscape shifted again. Quite dramatically, actually.
So?
Now we're seeing a really significant trend of people from developed countries, North America, Europe, traveling to developing or emerging economies for medical care.
Okay, now that's interesting. Why the reversal?
Yeah.
What's driving people from, say, the U.S. or U.K. to places like Thailand or Mexico for surgery?
Well, a huge factor is affordability, cost.
Ah, money talks.
It really does. The price tag for many procedures, everything from major dental work to, hip replacements or cosmetic surgery, can be vastly lower in some countries.
Significantly lower.
Oh, yeah, sometimes a fraction of the cost compared to back home. So that cost saving makes it a really viable, attractive option for many people, even factoring in travel costs.
And I guess the waiting time issue we mentioned earlier still applies too, even in developed countries.
Absolutely. Avoiding those long queues or treatment delays in their own national health services is still a major push factor, often working hand in hand with the cost savings.
Have big global events played a role in shaping this at all?
Yes, they have, sometimes in unexpected ways. For instance, the Asian financial crisis back in '97.
How did that impact things?
Well, some Southeast Asian countries facing economic pressure actually started to actively promote their hospitals and medical services to international patients. It was a strategy, to bring in foreign currency.
Wow, so a deliberate economic move using healthcare.
Pretty much. And then Something totally different, the September 11th attacks in 2001.
How did that connect?
Well, the increased security, the hassle, the scrutiny involved in international travel afterwards, particularly for people from certain regions traveling to, say, the U.S. It inadvertently pushed some patients towards destinations perceived as, well, easier to get into. Places like Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore saw a bit of an uptick, partly because of that.
Huh. It's really fascinating how these big economic and geopolitical shifts can shape something like where people go for surgery. Okay, so let's think about the person doing this, the patient. Their journey must be way different from just popping down to the local GP.
Oh, absolutely. It's way more complex. The geographical distance alone adds layers. Then you have international regulations, cultural differences, language. It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, can we sort of map that journey out? What are the main steps someone goes through if they decide to become a medical tourist?
Yeah, we can break it down. Generally, you can think of it in about 5 key phases: awareness, search, select, experience, and then a sort of enjoy, retain phase.
Okay, awareness. How does someone even find out this is an option?
Often it starts quite passively. They might, stumble across something online, an ad, maybe a blog post from someone who's done it, or they hear about it through word of mouth, maybe from friends or family.
So, not actively looking initially?
Not necessarily. It's often remote, maybe even coincidental at first. Just the idea gets planted. Oh, people do that. Marketing by providers can play a role too, subtly suggesting international options. The goal here for the patient is just becoming aware that this path even exists.
Got it. So the seed is planted. What happens next? Search.
Exactly. Now the patient gets active. They start researching. This is usually done remotely from home. They're looking at hospital websites, clinic social media pages, reading reviews, maybe checking out medical tourism facilitator agencies.
What are they looking for?
Reputation is key here. Specialization, too. They're digging into the credentials of the facility, the doctors, looking for testimonials, trying to gauge the quality of care. Their goal is to gather credible information and narrow down the possibilities.
Makes sense. You'd want to feel really sure before committing. Which brings us to the next stage. Select. That sounds like decision time.
It is. This is critical. The patient has all this info they've gathered, and now they have to assess it, compare the options, and actually choose a provider. Then they schedule the appointment, book things.
Is that comparison easy? Like comparing apples to apples?
Not always. And that's a challenge because there aren't universal international regulations or standards. So judging quality across borders can be tricky.
How do people navigate that?
Well, sometimes insurance helps. If a provider is in their international insurance network, that offers some level of vetting. But ultimately, it's about weighing the info, maybe communicating directly with the clinic, and making that choice. Booking the treatment package, sorting logistics, that's all part of this select phase. Their goal is obviously to choose the right provider and lock in the arrangements.
Okay, they've chosen, they've booked, they've traveled. Now comes the actual experience stage.
Right. This covers the core part, the treatment itself. So checking into the hospital or clinic, the consultations, the procedure performed by the medical team, any hospitalization needed, and then the checkout process.
And all the practical stuff too, I imagine.
Absolutely. Dealing with insurance processing, paying the bills for the hospital stay, that's all wrapped up in the experience. And sometimes it might include post-treatment wellness or rehab activities at the destination too. The patient's goal here is simple: receive successful treatment and care.
And it doesn't just end when they leave the hospital door, right? You mentioned an enjoy retain phase.
Correct. The journey often extends beyond the medical side. Many medical tourists combine their treatment with actual tourism sightseeing, enjoying the local culture.
So a bit of a holiday tacked on.
Often, yes. But retain is also key here. This phase includes the post-treatment communication with the provider back home, any necessary follow-up consultations, perhaps remotely. Good follow-up is crucial for recovery and overall satisfaction. The goal is successful recovery, a positive overall memory, and potentially becoming a repeat customer or recommending the service.
Wow. Okay. It really is a multi-step, complex process, which naturally leads us to think about the bigger picture issues. What are some of the major ethical or legal challenges wrapped up in health tourism?
Yeah, there are quite a few significant ones. A major concern is legal recourse. What happens if something goes wrong?
Right. Malpractice or just unsatisfactory treatment.
Exactly. Seeking legal remedies across borders can be incredibly difficult. You're dealing with different legal systems, different standards, and enforcing any judgment you might get can be costly and complex. Some suggest things like alternative dispute resolution, but it's still a murky area.
So patients might have less protection if things go bad.
Potentially, yes. And that links to another issue, the lack of uniform regulation. There's no single international body setting rules or guidelines specifically to protect medical tourists.
So no global standards.
Not really binding ones. Patients might not even be aware of their rights in the destination country. This contrasts with, say, the US, where there have been attempts to set guidelines. This lack of unified standards also applies to things like medical devices or drugs used, which can pose risks. Think about differing laws around surrogacy. That just shows how wildly different the legal and ethical landscapes can be country to country.
It sounds like a real minefield to navigate.
But
What
so-
about the quality of care itself? You mentioned accreditation earlier.
Yes, quality is a huge consideration. Accreditation bodies like JCI or ISO or national ones are often seen by patients as a sign of good quality, maybe lower risk.
But is it always?
Well, that's debated. The standards and how rigorously they're enforced can vary. Some question if accreditation in, say, a developing country carries the same weight as in a freely developed one. There's definitely a call for more universal, transparent accreditation systems.
And follow-up care, if complications arise after they get home.
That's another big challenge. Complications can happen after the patient returns home, and that puts the burden back on their home country's healthcare system. Local doctors might even be hesitant to treat complications from procedures done elsewhere due to potential liability issues.
I hadn't thought of that. It creates a tricky situation for their regular doctor.
It really can. And then there are ethical questions about the impact on the destination country's healthcare system.
How so?
Well, does the growth of medical tourism, focusing on international patients, divert resources or skilled staff away from the local population? Does it create a sort of two-tiered system where private hospitals cater to foreigners and the wealthy, while public facilities struggle?
That's a serious concern. Does it drive up costs locally?
It can, yeah. Differential pricing is common. Some argue that the revenue from medical tourism should be specifically used to subsidize and improve care for the local population to kind of balance things out.
A difficult balance to strike.
Very. And one last point here, health tourism sometimes provides access to treatments that are actually illegal or heavily restricted in the patient's home country.
Like what kinds of things?
Certain reproductive technologies are a big example, like specific types of IVF or, again, surrogacy. This raises all sorts of ethical questions, especially concerning the rights and welfare of surrogates in some countries.
Okay, definitely a lot of complex ethical and legal layers there. Let's circle back to accreditation for a moment. You said patients see it as important. How does it really function on the ground?
Right. So bodies like JCI, GHA, Global Healthcare Accreditation, they are definitely perceived by many medical tourists as a signal, a sign that maybe the risk of errors or infections is lower.
So it builds confidence.
It does. And for the hospitals, especially those in developing countries trying to attract an international clientele, getting accredited is a big deal. It boosts their brand, builds that crucial trust.
But does the research actually show that accredited hospitals have, say, better patient outcomes or higher satisfaction?
That's where it gets a bit nuanced. The empirical evidence is, well, it's mixed. Some studies do show improvements linked to accreditation, but often it's in things like safety culture or internal processes like better infection control protocols, more standardized procedures.
So improvements in how the hospital runs things.
Exactly, tangible operational improvements. But other studies haven't found a strong direct link between just having the accreditation sticker and patients reporting higher overall satisfaction.
Why not?
Because patient satisfaction is complex, right? It depends on so many things, the doctor's bedside manner, communication, the food, the room, not just whether the hospital passed an audit.
Okay, so accreditation is important for signaling and maybe improving some processes, but it's not the whole story for patient experience.
Pretty much. It's definitely used for branding and trust building. There's an interesting case in Mexico where they adopted U.S. hospital standards for their own national certification, and they did see revenue from American medical tourists increase afterwards. But correlation isn't causation. It suggests standards matter, but it's hard to isolate the accreditation effect completely.
So ideally, accreditation should lead to real performance improvements, not just be a marketing badge.
That's the hope, yes, for it to be truly meaningful beyond just signaling.
Okay. Looking ahead then, what's the future hold for health tourism? Is it just going to keep growing?
All signs point to yes, very likely. Globalization isn't going away, patient awareness is increasing thanks to the internet, and those core drivers, cost, access, speeder, they remain powerful.
So more people crossing borders for care seems probable.
It does. But a key challenge that remains is the lack of sort of standardized, objective ways for patients to compare facilities internationally. It's still hard to get truly comparable data on quality and outcomes across different countries.
We need better benchmarks.
Exactly. Developing reliable, transparent benchmarks could really empower patients and help them make safer, more informed choices.
And more research needed too, I guess.
Definitely. We need ongoing, rigorous research to really understand the full picture, the motivations, the actual experiences, the long-term outcomes for medical tourists, and also the wider impact on healthcare systems, both sending and receiving countries. Getting more data directly from patients is key.
Right. Okay, let's just pause and sort of recap this deep dive. We've really covered a lot of ground on health tourism, the why, the how, and the what to watch out for.
Yeah, we've seen how things like needing specific treatments, wanting advanced care, or just needing it now are pushing people across borders. And the journey itself, it's so much more than just the operation.
Absolutely. And it comes with this whole package of unique considerations, legal, ethical, quality, both for you as someone to be thinking about it and for global healthcare overall.
And here's where it gets, I think, really interesting, and it's this intersection, isn't it? Personal choice meaning vastly different international rules and standards, all mixed with this basic human drive for quality healthcare. It's such a dynamic space.
And understanding those dynamics, those nuances, really helps you, our listener, be more informed in this incredibly connected world we live in.
So what does this spark for you? Maybe a deeper curiosity about healthcare standards around the globe. Or perhaps it just highlights how important it is to really know your rights, your options when you're considering any kind of medical treatment, home or away.
We definitely encourage you to keep exploring this. What questions popped into your head during our chat? What other areas of, digital diaspora or global mobility are you curious about?
Yeah, let us know. Like this deep dive, share it if you found it useful, and definitely comment with your thoughts or questions. Your engagement genuinely helps us figure out what to explore next. And hey, if you like this, subscribe for more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. As the world gets ever more interconnected, how do you think international agreements or collaborations might evolve? Could we see systems emerge to better support and protect people seeking healthcare across borders, something to mull over? Until our next deep dive.